December 3rd, 2012, Troy City Council meeting. We are pleased this evening to have Pastor Fred Betcher from Troy Assembly of God, who will provide us with the invocation. So if you would please stand and remain standing after the invocation for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Betcher.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for the day that you've given us today. And I ask, Lord, that as the men and women of this council and the members of the community come together tonight, that you give your wisdom, Lord, and your guidance to each one, both in word and action. God, let unity and peace reign in this place tonight, God. And just thank you, Lord, for the city of Troy, God, and the United States, Lord, that you've the blessings that you've bestowed on this country, Lord. And I just ask that you bless this evening and this council meeting. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The Troy City Council meeting is now called to order. The roll call, Ms. Bittner.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Campbell?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Here.
Councilmember Teets?
Here. All present. Our first order of business tonight is certificates of recognition and special presentations. So we have 3 of those tonight, so I'm going to move down to the microphone. Is this our mic here? I'll work around it. Thank you. Kurt Ovenship is going to accept this proclamation for the City of Troy, Tree City, USA. Whereas the City of Troy has been certified as a Tree City, USA for 22 years through the National Arbor Day Foundation, and this prestigious certification proves the City of Troy is dedicated to the future of its urban forest, and whereas the City of Troy wishes to acknowledge that Troy's urban forest reduces noise, air pollution, energy cost, reflective light, flooding, stabilizes soil, sequesters carbon, provides habitat for wildlife, and improves the overall quality of life. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic viability of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas it is in the interest of all to plant and protect trees, and whereas in conjunction with Arbor Day celebration, the City of Troy will plant 1 tree within a city park. In the past, the funds used to purchase these trees have been donated by the Troy Garden Club. Whereas Troy desires to be recognized at Tree City, USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation and wishes to continue this tree planting ways, therefore be it resolved that the Troy City Council hereby proclaims May 3rd, 2013, May 2nd, 2014, and May 1st, 2015 as Arbor Day in the City of Troy, and urges all citizens to support our city's urban forestry program and to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. This is signed this 3rd day of December by myself and the members of City Council, and congratulations, and I present this on behalf of the City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the City of Troy Fleet Division Award for Elite Fleet 2012. If I could get Sam Lamorato to come up, and it looks like you have your staff with you, so I'm sure you want to bring them up. And this is not the first time this has happened to this fleet, and we're proud that these guys go out and do the work and get these awards for us, and we certainly appreciate that. Troy's Public Works Department Fleet Division was recognized with the Elite Fleet 2012 award. The elite fleets are the best of the best, and only one fleet per year is added to the ranks of elite fleets. This prestigious award is given to the #1 fleet winners from the previous 4 years, as long as they are still meeting the highest standards in fleet. So congratulations, Sam, on behalf of the city, and that is this one here. And if you would remain standing, I have another one here. This is the City of Troy Fleet Division meets Blue Seal of Excellence. Troy's Fleet Division's professional staff has once again met the Blue Seal of Excellence recognition program standards established by the National Institute for Automotive Service Excellence, which is ASE. The City of Troy Fleet Division is the only municipality in the state of Michigan that is current member of the Blue Seal recognition program. Troy's Fleet Division contracts with 13 neighboring communities and other government agencies to maintain and service their vehicles, which brings in revenue. So once again, Sam, congratulations on behalf of the Troy City Council for a job well done.
Thank you. If I could just say a few words. Mayor, Honorable Mayor, City Council, City Management, we appreciate this recognition for these 2 fleet awards. These awards would not be possible without the hard work of the staff here. And this is only part of the staff. There's a few home sleeping right now so they can come in tomorrow morning and give it heck. The staff takes pride in the workmanship, and they make sure that the fleet of vehicles are ready to serve our citizens, our residents, our business owners, and to provide the safest service possible. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good job.
The next order of business is C4, which is the June 30th, 2012 audit presentation. So I will defer to City Manager Kishnick for the presentation.
And thankfully, we have Mr. Darling here with his staff to make that presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor,
Good evening.
Council. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to go over the results of our financial operations for the year ended June 30th, 2012. Before I do, though, I'd like to take a minute to recognize and celebrate some awards that the Finance Division has got. So not to be outdone by our outstanding fleet and DPW departments, we'd like to get into the act a little bit ourselves. And to start that off, I'd like to talk about the popular annual financial report that was issued for June 30th, 2011. And to help me celebrate that, I'd like to welcome Cindy Stewart, if she's in the house. I know she is. I've seen her before. And along with Beth Tashnick, who couldn't be with us tonight. They were very instrumental in putting this together. This is what it looks like. And let me talk a little bit about it. The Award for Outstanding Achievement in Popular Annual Financial Reporting is a prestigious I want you to hold this up a little better than I do. The Popular Annual Financial Reporting is a prestigious national award recognizing conformance with the highest standards for preparation of state and local governmental popular financial reports. In order to receive this award for outstanding achievement, a government unit must publish a popular annual financial report whose contents conform to the program's standards of creativity, presentation, understandability, and reader appeal. The governmental unit must also receive the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, which I'll talk about in a minute. This award marks the 13th consecutive year that the city has achieved this prestigious award. Congratulations. Now, don't sit down, because I got one more to talk about, if I could. I'd like to welcome up Lisa Burnham and Anita Halpern from the city's finance division to help celebrate and receive the city certificate for achievement for excellence in financial reporting for the 2011 comprehensive annual financial report. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its the attainment represents a significant accomplishment by the government and management. The CAFR has been judged by an impartial panel from across the nation to meet the highest standards of the program, including demonstrating constructive spirit of full disclosure, to clearly communicate its financial story, and motivate potential users to actually read the CAFR. In Michigan, there are 1,775 cities. Of that, only 6 cities in the state receive both of these awards. That's about 30/10 of 1%. So in other words, if we were taking the ACT, we'd be in the 99.66 percentile. So congratulations for your hard work and dedication, and congratulations to the City of Troy of receiving these prestigious national awards.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I forgot to also mention the rest of the finance staff, if I could, real quick. Dawn Williams, Kathy Jules, Lori Thayer, and Renee Prisciandero. Thank you. All right, so let's go forward with this year's 2012 CAFR. And let's go ahead and talk just briefly about the contents. You'll see you have an introductory section which starts on page 1. The financial section starts on page 17. A statistical section which starts on page 121. And a single audit section for the city's federal awards starts on page 50. Again, 4 sections that comprise 159 pages of financial data. Let's talk about the introductory section for a minute. Again, it serves, as it would state, as an introduction to the financial statements. It also provides a brief narrative of what comprises the financial statements, along with economic conditions and outlook for the city. It provides financial narrative information and also provides us organizational and fund structures. Again, if you're not really into reading financial statements, I would suggest this section along with the MD&A section to providing basically a narrative overview of the financial results. Next, the financial section. The financial section really has 7 parts in it. The first part is the independent auditor's report. And I'm pleased to introduce to you tonight Paula Bedford, CPA. She is the audit supervisor for the audit and consulting firm of Raymond Robson, who provided your independent audit of these financial statements. And here tonight to talk about them is Paula Bedford, CPA. She was your audit supervisor during this year's field work. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, I'm pleased to announce that we have issued the audit as of November 27, 2012. This year the audit went very well, as it has in years past, due in part to the great staff that you guys have under the direction of Mr. Tom Darling. There were no material weaknesses noted, no significant deficiencies or control deficiencies noted in the audit this year, which is great. We have issued an unqualified opinion, which is a clean audit opinion and the highest level of assurance that we can give on any audit report. I also wanted to bring up, a few things that we like to bring to the attention of the council in regards to how things went this year and what was new. This year, the city has elected to adopt GASB 63 and 65 for early implementation. Under the direction of Mr. Darling, he is one of the first ones within the state to actually early implement this, so I commend the city on taking this step forward ahead of all the other municipalities in the area. Also, we were pleased to announce that there were no difficulties encountered during the audit. We had no difficulties with management or with any of the team members that we dealt with. And as I said, there were no misstatements or any audit adjustments that needed to be made within the audit this year. And also, we will be submitting the audit for the certification again this year, as the audit has met our requirements to do so, and we fully expect that they, again, will receive the Certificate of Achievement for financial reporting. Now, if you have any other questions for me before Mr. Darling heads back up and goes over the numbers for you guys, be happy to answer anything.
Questions from council?
No.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bedford. Okay, so now we've gone through the independent auditor's report. Again, in your statements you have what they call the management's discussion and analysis, or MD&A. Your financial section has really two sets of types of financial statements with two different perspectives, and we will go into these in a little more detail in a minute. One is the governmental-wide financial statements, which talks about the city as a whole and all of its funds. You have individual fund financial statements, along with notes to the financial statements that provide more detail and clarity to individual line items that you might see in the financial statements, along with required supplementary information, which really speaks to the city's pension systems and their funding ratios, along with, at the end, combining fund statements. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the governmental-wide financial statements. The focus is on the city as a whole. In other words, it includes all the funds with the exception of your fiduciary funds, which are really not assets of the city, but really held in trust. It uses the full accrual basis of accounting. In other words, it includes not just current assets, but capital assets, along with any related long-term debt. So again, it's a full accrual basis of accounting. So the idea is not on spendable resources, but what is the economic condition of the entity. It provides a net position, which again is not spendable resources, but it also indicates some of the long-term aspects of any short-term financing decisions we make. In other words, if we were going out and getting revolving debt, it would show up there as eroding our economic condition. Okay? So let's go ahead and go to page 30 if we could. And we'll be kind of going back and forth between a couple of these pages here. So if we go to page 30, you will notice under the primary government section you have governmental activities, business activities, and then the total. And what we're going to talk about here right now is really the net position at the end of June 30, 2012, of what was the net position of the city. Again, for both our governmental activities and business activities, you had total assets of around $454.9 million, liabilities of $49.3 million, leaving basically our governmental-wide net position at the end of the fiscal year of $405.6 million. Now, it should be noted that this is a sign of economic health as we see our net position increase because it has capital assets in it. And as we know that as we replace our capital assets, it costs more today than it did yesterday as they depreciate. So again, a sign of economic health is you would naturally see a progression in your net position. It should be noted that these are not spendable resources, but also includes capital assets, as we're going to see right here. In fact, 72% of your net position is invested in capital assets. And as you can see, not only have we maintained it, but we've also increased our capital asset or investment capital asset position. Again, it's not just, we didn't just spend, again, the difference of around $1.3 million. It was also not only the depreciation we covered, but also increase an additional investment of $1.3 million. Should also note here that our unrestricted went up by about $12.6 million. But it should be noted that this isn't just the result of operations, but as you can see, our restricted has come down. So in other words, we're moving restricted assets, which have tags on them, to something that's more unrestricted and budgetable. Okay. Let's go ahead and look at if we can, both revenue and expenditures at, again, a governmental-wide basis. And again, this includes all of the funds of the city, governmental, business-type activities, you know, the general fund, water, sewer, the golf courses, our special revenue funds. If we could turn to page 31. Okay. You'll note that for all of our revenues, we had about $105.2 million in revenues and about $94.7 million in expenditures. And again, the expenditures are in that first column on page 31. So the idea under this statement is to show you what does it cost for government. Okay? With inside that, then it will say, well, some of the programs that we do generate they have grants or they have charges for services, so they're able to generate some of their own revenues. So what is then the net effect that you can see under this expense, which is the far right column on page 31? It's really what is the cost for these programs that we make up through basically property taxes and some state shared revenues. Okay. Again, revenues in this case, you can see it's been a steady decline. However, we did go up from 2011 by about $4 million. This was primarily due to business-type activities as opposed to governmental activities. In other words, water, sewer, and the golf courses. And that's primarily due from volumes. We've had significant increases in volumes because we had a pretty warm summer, so we had a little more water usage and a few more rounds through those golf courses than we had in the past. You should also note that the trend of expenditures went down. Again, this is primarily due to wage decreases or our staffing levels primarily. And it really happened, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about this, about some attrition that we received this year because we had the early retirement program that we lost a lot of staffing, that it takes us a while basically to replace those positions. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Okay. Next, again, as I said on page 31, I really like this chart because, again, it tells you, what are the services that we provide and what we're using for taxes to basically provide those services. Again, you can see our primary expenditures in public safety. It's about $27.2 million to provide our public safety services. Of that, we do receive some grants and funding of about $3.4 million, but that difference then is really how we allocate property taxes. Okay. Again, we had about $65.6 million in total expenditures for all of our governmental type funds. We had about $19.7 million in charges for services or program revenues in there, leaving about $45.9 million of expenditures that we needed to fund through property taxes and state share type revenues. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the fund financial statements. Again, the fund financial statements is really on the near-term inflows and outflows. Really, it's looking at spendable or budgetable type resources. It uses what we call in the accounting profession the modified accrual method of accounting, which means there are no capital assets in these statements. There is no long-term debt. Revenues are recognized when earned and when available. and it's also the basis that we really use kind of for our management decisions and when we go through the budget process in the spring. And that was the wrong button. All right, let's try that button. Okay. Again, as Paula indicated, we did adopt GASB 63 and 65 this year, so you kind of already went through that with you. I guess one of the more notable portions of how that affects the statements is on page 33. And on page 33, where you used to only have assets, liabilities, and fund balances, this year you can see there is a part called deferred inflows of resources, which is basically your deferred personal property taxes that we haven't collected quite yet. Okay. Yes, Mr. Teets, Councilman Teets.
Could you describe one more time in layman's terms what GASB statements are versus what's been done in the past?
Sure. GASB statements are Governmental Accounting Standards Board statements, and they dictate basically how we account from its generally accepted accounting principles is what they dictate. And so with that, they have that's what they do. They make pronouncements. We, fortunately this year, we actually early implemented one of their statements that basically about a year ahead of schedule. So we didn't wait for the last minute like many communities did. We thought it was a good statement, and we incorporated it into our financial statements going forward.
Perfect. Oh, and I just wanted to make sure folks understood at home that you're doing good work, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so as we know, the general fund is our main operating fund of the city. And so let's go ahead and look at that in a little more detail. Again, if we can turn to page 37, your financial statements, and this is the general fund budget to actual statement. Again, we had total revenues of about $48.5 million, total expenditures of $45.8 million. Some other financing sources of $3.7 million, resulting in an increase in fund balance of about $6.5 million. So as we look on our chart here, a couple things that we should probably note. There is clearly a steady decrease in our revenues. Again, this is the first year, though, that, let's see, since 2009 through 2011, we were actually under budget. So 2010 through 2012, we actually came in above projection, which is kind of where we want to be. We want to be maybe above our budget if we can, because again, that helps fund our programs. One of the big differences this year why we are above budget is in the area of state shared revenue. We actually received about $943,000 more than we had expected from the state of Michigan, which is quite rare compared to some of the trend information. We'll get more into that here in just a second. Along with our charges for services were about $730,000 over what we had expected. Again, we had shortfalls from 2009 through 2011, so it's nice to see, again, it's for 2012 that we're back above the board on that area. So let's talk about our revenue sources and where do they come from. Well, 58% of the general fund revenues come from property taxes. 13% comes from intergovernmental revenues, which is basically state shared revenue, federal grants, any local cooperative grants that we're involved in, and another 14% from charges for services. Of those three, then that accounts really for 85% of our revenue sources. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at what's going on with those. As you can see, property taxes continue to decline for 2012. In fact, they're basically at 2003 levels. Again, excuse me. We actually dropped about $6.3 million from our high point in 2008. Our intergovernmental revenues, as you can see, which included state shared revenue in the purple, in 2003 was about $8.1 million, and we're down to about $6.5 million for 2012. and our charges for services are relatively consistent. Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the expenditure side of it now. Again, as you see, our revenues decline, so as management, we try to live within our means, and you can see that our expenditures have significantly declined over the last few years also. With that, you should know that our expense was about $45.8 million, as I said earlier, which is basically down about $17.2 million from 2007. Again, if we compare it to budget, we're continually below budget, significantly below budget for this year, and that's really for a couple reasons. Again, one of the reasons is the decrease in wages that we had this year, again from attrition, from the retirement programs that we had, and refilling those positions. So that's kind of a one-time type thing as we get up to our budget in 2013 and restaff those positions for sustainability. Those will probably go up. Should also be noted 2012 doesn't have a library in it, where the prior years did, because the library had a tax millage, and now it's part of your special revenue funds. So those expenditures wouldn't be included in that either. Also, part of that too is our snow removal. We had a mild winter, so our snow removal costs were under by about $1 million compared to some of the prior years. Okay. So let's talk about then our expenditures again. 58%, as we kind of noted before from a governmental-wide level, is related to our public safety. 16% is for general government, which includes obviously council and management, but also your treasury functions, assessing, finance, planning, and zoning. 13% again is with, if we add up our road and our other DPW services, it's another 13% of what we allocate our funds towards. Again, let's talk about our expenditures. Again, you can see really to match our revenue streams, expenditures have decreased basically in all of our categories as trend information over the years. Public safety is basically back to about 2004 levels. Parks, recreation, of course, is as low as it's been in over 10 years from what we've got here. Again, it should be noted that the library is not part of that. If the library was part of that, it would be another $2.5 million greater, if you want to use it for comparative purposes. And so there we go. Again, we've seen a decline in revenues. We've seen a decline in expenditures, or how management and council is managing that aspect of it. So if we put it all together, again, decrease in revenues, decreasing expenditures to work with inside those parameters. Again, 2000 through 2009, it should be noted, though, that expenditures were greater than revenues. So we've kind of turned that ship around, because 2000 through 2012, we've kept expenditures underneath our revenue streams. And again, it should be noted in 2012, there is no library, and is part of that scenario. Okay. So, because we were able to keep our expenditures underneath revenues, our general fund balance increased by about $6.5 million, as we noted. Part of that, for a total then of about $34 million. Unassigned fund balance, and this is on page 33. I'm sorry, if you go to page 33 to the fund balance section. Unassigned fund balance is about $23.3 million, or about 51% of your expenditures. Again, it's partly due to the extra in the fund balance from operations, but it's also, if you can note here, it's part of coming out of assigned fund balance. For previous years, they were restricted or assigned for other purposes. You can see that's going down. That also helps raise your undesignated fund balance. So it's kind of two factors there of why that's where it's at today. Okay. Again, this is obviously this is history, right? We're talking about what happened as opposed to the budget of what we're going to do. But I did want to put this in here. As you can see, for 2012, expenditures were quite a bit underneath our revenue stream, which increased your fund balance. As we go forward into the 13 through 15 budget, though, you can see that we have budgeted to use fund balance. So I just wanted to make sure that we note that the residuals that we received this year are budgeted to be used as we go through in future years. The bottom graph then will show what that will do to your unassigned fund balance as we go through the 13 through 15 fiscal years, according to budget. Okay. Any questions on the general fund before I move on to capital projects?
Questions for council?
Yes,
Just a
Councilman.
comment. I'm really pleased that our general fund increased about $6.5 million. I don't think we were anticipating that. I think that's going to help ease the burden in years going forward, as you're showing us here.
Absolutely. Again, this is kind of because of the attrition type thing. This is kind of I don't expect that in the future. It's kind of because we had the retirees and that attrition type thing. But like you say, the residuals that we had this year, because of some of the shortfalls that we're projecting through 2013 and 15, the effects will be less overall, the burden.
I think the point is this is better than we projected.
But it's better than we projected. I think when we did the budgeting, we were expecting about around $2 million of increase in fund balance. So we
$4.5 million ahead.
Exactly, because when we budget, or at least when we project from a conservative basis, we're going to expect those positions to be filled versus waiting to fill them till this fiscal year. Again, from attrition, from wages. Okay, so let's talk about the capital projects fund. If I can get you to turn to page 35. Capital project fund had about $8.9 million in revenues, had $11.5 million in expenditures, and about $1.5 million in other financing sources and uses. So as you can see on my chart here, if you take the revenues and other financing sources, that's about $10.7 million. If you take our expenditures and other financing uses, it's about $11.9 million. So let's talk a little bit about this one. This one's probably going to be more of a challenge as we go into the future in my estimates. As you can see, over the last 4 years, we've had expenditures in excess of revenues. And that's primarily, again, trying to keep our infrastructure, primarily our roads and streets, which we'll talk about in a minute, at basically at the levels that we'd like them at. And again, if you remember our PACER ratings between good, fair and poor, a lot of our resources are going into trying to maintain those service levels. So again, as I pointed out, 65% of our capital budget goes towards streets, with 11% going towards buildings and another 11% going towards equipment. Should probably be noted that that equipment is primarily public safety equipment, i.e. fire trucks, things of that nature. Fire apparatus. Okay. Let's go to page 33, if we will. Then what does that have on the effect of our capital projects fund balance? And again, as you can see, we've experienced significant erosion over the last 5 years, and it's something, in my mind, something that we're going to need to address. In fact, our fund balance is less than half of what it was in 2008, as, again, we spend resources to try and maintain our infrastructure to the levels that they were. Let's talk about our non-major governmental funds. Non-major governmental funds basically include major local streets, your refuge fund, your library fund, the community development block grant fund, and your debt service funds. If we can go to, again, this is on page 35. You had revenues of about $15 million. along with some other financing sources of about $3.2 million for a total revenue stream of about $18.4 million. You had expenditures of $9.8 million, along with other financing uses of about $7.8 million for expenditures of about $17.7 million. Again, this is probably the first time in the last 5 years that that we actually had revenues in excess of expenditures. So that's a good sign that at least we're not eroding fund balance. It should also be noted that your library fund is also part of this too, this year, as it wasn't in prior years. Fund balance increased by around $648,000, and again, as I mentioned, the library is part of this right now, part of your non-major governmental funds, which is primarily your special revenue funds. So let's go ahead and look at then what has that done in the fund balance. Again, as we noted, expenditures were in excess of revenues for the last few years. This year, we kind of reversed that trend somewhat. Again, all the fund balance are identified for specific purposes. It's not necessarily discretionary, right? They're made to fund specific programs, made to fund specifically for the library, funds specifically for your refuge and sanitation fund, and specifically for your major and local street funds. Okay? Let's go ahead and talk about the enterprise funds now. If we could get you to turn to page 40. Okay, let's talk about the water fund. On page 40, we had operating revenues about $15.9 million. We had operating expenditures about $13.9 million, non-operating revenues about $95,000, showing a net change in position of around $2.2 million. Should be noted that these funds are on the full accrual basis of accounting. So what does that mean? Well, it means that in your expenditures, it doesn't count. You don't count when you buy new pipe. You don't count the acquisition of capital. You depreciate it. So again, from an economic position, the economic position of the water fund increased by about $2 million. So let's talk about that then. As far then as what is in our net position. Again, we had, as I said, our net position increased by about $2 million. So our total net position was around $98.9 million for the water fund in total, but of that, $78.9 million is invested in capital assets. And again, as we look at this, we're looking for a trend that at least maintains, if not gradually increases, because again, as we replace our old water system, the price of those capital assets from a dollar perspective increase. So you would naturally want to see an increase in the investment of your capital assets. Basically what it's telling us is that the city is investing back into its infrastructure and trying to maintain that level of service. Again, our unrestricted has been hanging around the $20 million range for the last few years. And again, those are both short and long-term assets, and quite honestly, it's mostly working capital. For the water fund, we only bill out every 3 months, so we have to have some kind of working capital to obviously pay Detroit Water and Oakland County Sewer for those for that usage prior to us collecting. Let's go ahead and talk about the sewer fund. Again, we had revenues around $13.2 million, expenditures about $12.4 million. Again, this doesn't include outlays for capital expense, but rather uses the theory of depreciation. At the end of the year, the net position for the sewer fund increased by around $984,000. Of that, so the total net position at the end of the year was around $65 million. Of that, $35.6 million is invested in capital assets, around with $29.4 million that is unrestricted. In this case, at least for the last year, we hadn't quite invested back into the sewer system as to the level that it had depreciated. So that's why you see a slight decrease, again, in the investment to capital assets. But overall, you know, it seems to be relatively steady. Unrestricted assets obviously increased, as we talked about, but those may be allocated in future years to help and reinvest back in our capital assets, and I think those type of projects are going on as we speak. Our last major enterprise fund is Sanctuary Lake Golf Course. This is the first year that I know of that operating revenues were in excess of operating expenditures. So that's good news for this course. It should probably be noted, let's see if we go back to this, that you had operating revenues of about $1.4 million, operating expenditures of about $1.3 million, so you had operating income of around $105,000. Before you had non-operating expenditures, which is basically interest on the debt. The interest on the debt was around $484,000. So from an economic perspective, it was a decrease in net position of around $378,000, but let's talk about that just a little bit more. It should be noted that since 2011, the city has engaged the golf course management company of Billy Casper Golf. And in this year, you can see our revenues have significantly increased, but I think it's partly due to the warm winter and spring that we had during the year. In fact, as far as I know, this is the first time we actually had golf rounds in every month of the year. So hopefully we continue to have those type of winters and springs. So let's go ahead and then talk about what I just tried to explain. You can see in the prior years we actually had a net operating loss before we even tried to fund our non-operating expenses. The non-operating expenses, again, are primarily interest expenses on the debt. So basically the spread would be in the prior years the loss plus trying to fund the debt. But in this year, again, we actually had some operating income to help offset some of those interest expenses. Again, as we're investing in a golf course. Okay. The non-enterprise funds, which is basically Sylvan Glen and the Aquatic Center, again, had about $1.8 million in revenues and around $1.6 million in expenditures. Again, it's primarily from Sylvan Glen and the Aquatic Center due to the revenues due to the mild spring and warm summer that we had. Again, this is the first time in the last 5 years that we've actually had revenues that were in excess of our expenditures for those non-major enterprise type funds. Again, if we look at this then from our non-major enterprise funds, this one you can see that our investment in capital assets has been decreasing. So we haven't been investing back into the golf course or the aquatic center, at least at the rate of depreciation. So from an economic basis, those have deteriorated to some extent from an economic basis. The unrestricted balance of about 2.96 of that, though, about $2 million is non-current assets. In other words, they are advances to Sanctuary Lake to help fund the shortfalls that it has from cash flow. So the 2.96 is not necessarily spendable resources. It had about 1.1 million in cash if you look at excuse me, at page 39. Any questions on the enterprise funds before I go into the pension systems? Okay. If I can direct your attention to our pension systems, the data that I'm presenting up here is on page 84, and we briefly spoke about it in the last council meeting as we had just received our actuary reports. Again, these contributions, you can see in the purple are the required contributions as determined by our actuaries, and the yellow or green bars tells us how we're funded as a percentage. Should be noted, first of all, that the city made 100% of its required contributions through 2012, every year since 2008, and always has. I did want to put out here, because we did just get the actuarial results, what the 2013 and 14 estimates are. And again, as you could tell from last meeting, that I was pleased to see that the actuary had come down with our required funding for 13 and 14 will be less than what it was in 12. So we're heading in the right direction in that aspect of it. In fact, the 2013 and 14 required contributions are about $300,000 per year, plus less than what we were required to make for 2012. Again, we're looking at 95% funded. I'm projecting out 95% funded just because that's kind of an actuary thing and not a finance director thing of what that would be. Okay. Let's go to our volunteer fire incentive program. That's stayed pretty consistent, around the 800,000, 850,000 range. Because this isn't necessarily a true pension system, it's more we kind of fund as we go type system, and that's why we're only about 48% funded, because we can only invest in basically U.S. Treasuries and those type of instruments other than stocks and stuff that you can with a normal pension system. So obviously our returns aren't aggressive as would be in a normal pension system. So I would expect as we go forward to still stay in that $850,000 per year range contributions. Retiree health care system, again, the retiree healthcare system. Now, this actuary study is done only every other year, so every 2 years, and we'll get ready to submit data to the actuary for the 12/31/2012 fiscal year. And it's gone down because we're funding that as a percentage of payroll. Our payroll has gone down significantly, and so our contributions to the Retiree Healthcare Trust has gone down too. Okay. Again, I would expect, though, when we have this new actuary study done, that our contributions required by the actuary may go up, and they may go up significantly, because, again, his assumptions are on a certain level of payroll. Well, we didn't come near that level of payroll, basically. And so I think the next study that we get, I would suspect they may go up significantly more than what we've had. Finally, in your financial statements is the statistical section, which is one of my favorite sections of the whole statement. Again, it has financial trends for the last 10 years. It shows the city's revenue capacity based on current millage rates, its debt capacity. It has some great demographic and economic information in there. It has some operating information, including permits and how much water we've sold and kind of operating type of disclosures. I think it's very good reading, at least to go through and kind of get an indication over the last 10 years of trend information from both a financial standpoint and from an outcome standpoint of what we did do. Okay. Finally, again, we've received the award for the 2011 CAFR, and we expect to submit your June 30, 2012 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, again, for this prestigious award. We've received it 15 years in a row now, and we're hoping for number 16. Who asked the first question?
Councilwoman McGinnis.
I just want to say nice job. Thank you for providing all this information to us.
actually in a way that I think is pretty easy to understand. So we appreciate you giving us this update. I know that this is kind of the annual time of year to do this. And I just want to throw something out there for going forward. I know we have a lot of things on our plate here on council, but hopefully we're getting this information, and as we have in the past, we'll also be able to begin some budget discussions where we're going to pair this information with some other things that you noted, but obviously that information wouldn't be included here, but staffing levels and level of service and all of the components that we talk about together when we talk about the budget. So I know City Manager Kishnick, you have a lot on your plate starting off here, but just so you know, that's somewhere that I'm sure we're all anxious to go, whether it's scheduling some preliminary budget discussions, taking a look at ICMA reports then and now and kind of where we're at, as well as staffing, because there are some holes, and we used to really have that as a focus during our budget discussions, but I think it's important for council and the public to know where we're at, what positions are going to be filled, and what will look like going forward. So thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Questions? Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
I'm good.
Councilman Campbell?
The statistics really are great reading. I mean, on a Friday night, there's nothing better than reading all this stuff. It's really exciting stuff. But when I'm done with them, what's going to, have you any anything in your crystal ball, what's going to happen with the personal property tax if that's repealed? What that's going to do to our budget long term? And do you have any
From specifically the tax appeal process?
From personal property.
For personal property taxes, from our standpoint, again, it's still in litigation. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but today's, menu costs, personal property tax is around 10% of our tax revenues, okay? Now, again, the discussions are, well, to take away, but will you replace? And so that's where the debate comes in of how, the state intends to compensate these municipalities for that reduction, and there's all different types of formulas. Again, some municipalities are more reliant on personal property taxes than we are, but again, it's still about 10% of our budget, so it's still significant. The just that's out there right now talks about, well, how much is related to public safety, or do you fund public safety with that, and they'll fund that at a different rate than they would other types of funding mechanisms. And again, it's still kind of out there. The idea is that at some point they would actually replace 85% of what you lost of that 10% reduction. But again, as far as my crystal ball, I can't tell you. At least at this point, however, I can tell you that we will deal with it when it does come, as far as our levels.
Thanks.
Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Okay. There are no carryover items or public hearings scheduled tonight, so that moves us to public comment for items on the agenda. And before we do that, we generally have some words for the audience, and I'm going to defer to Councilman Teets this evening, who is going to ask the citizens for their attention.
Sure. We have 41 people that have applied to serve in the one spot, so the odds are better than winning the lottery, but still there are going to be 41 folks that are not selected. And I guess I'm asking, and speaking with the mayor as well, that everyone in their comments, if they do want to talk about the position, that they treat each of those folks respectfully, and that they remember that all the people that are applying are somebody's brother or somebody's sister or mom or dad or grandpa and grandma or whatever. And so I would encourage everyone to keep that in mind. If you are planning on being attacking someone personally, I can certify that I will speak up, because I don't think anyone deserves to have their reputation attacked simply because they want to volunteer in their community and jump into the fire of being on city council. So with that said, that's just the comments I wanted to bring up.
Thank you. And I concur 100% with those comments. And in addition, if you do intend to speak tonight, please pay attention to the public comments section in the agenda that discusses the rules that are set forth by this council regarding conduct at the podium. We will strictly enforce those rules. So I'm going to first ask Mr. Dan Brake, was it your intent to speak on N1 this evening?
Is N1 council comment?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, yes it is.
But there's no council comments in
Good evening. My name is Dan Brake, and I'm running for mayor of Troy in the February 2013 election. Tonight I want to talk about some facts that we have only recently learned. These are facts that have been kept from council by your city attorney and bear on the Attorney General's lawsuit against our city.
Brake?
And I'm certain you're going to be discussing
One
them
minute, please.
during council comments.
I don't think that's accurate. Councilman Teets, I will defer to you.
With all respect, perhaps later on with items not on the agenda, it's not on the agenda, it may come up during council comments. But I think the intent when we passed these rules was that things that were strictly on the agenda, and I think we certainly could say that someone could be talking about something or so forth, but they could be talking about the squirrels in the park for that matter. And so I think in the sense of fairness and goodwill, I think it makes sense. And
I think council would ask you to just wait until the public comments for items not on the agenda. That is not on the agenda tonight. So we
They are your own rules, and they do not prohibit me from speaking on council comments. Since it's on your agenda, you are bound by the Open Meetings Act to abide by your own rules.
I will defer to the city attorney, please.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Ms. Bloom?
Yes, there is nothing that is expressly listed, and your rules limit it to what is actually on there as an item, and there is nothing on there that appears under council comments. So therefore, it would be more appropriate to have the speaker speak on items that are not on the printed agenda.
Thank you. I notice your name is on there. I'll call you first. Thank you, Mr.
But you won't be giving me 3 minutes plus 3 minutes.
Correct.
You've heard my objection. I'll take action.
Thank you. Resident Irv Wedgrow, was it your intent to speak on P1? P1. And that is...
Study session.
Yes, sir.
Can I attack myself?
Yes.
I just wanted to introduce myself shortly to the members of council. I know some of you better than others. I am one of the 41 running for council. Several folks have encouraged me over the years to run for council or some capacity. My response has always been to pull out my wallet and ask them if $7 is enough. Well, this time it was 45 cents, and it was enough for a 45-cent stamp. So that tells you essentially that I'm fiscally very conservative. My home relies on my pension and Social Security income, and I would take that same approach to spending the taxpayers' money. I also know that it takes money to make money, and this is why I supported the Transit Center. Many folks watching know that I was a part of the trust group at its inception. However, I left trust shortly after that when I felt they were getting into political partisanship, which I did not agree with, and I saw as contrary to their mission statement. This should tell you that I am fiercely independent in my approach to the city matters. I belong to no party. I subscribe to no political ideology. During my years at Ford, 44 years at Ford, I conducted many mediation sessions. I also served as Ford's principal expert witness on dealer litigation. In those roles, I came to appreciate and understand the sincerity of all viewpoints and would bring that perspective to council. Every vote I would make would be thoroughly researched, and my vote would be solely based on the best interest of the city. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up for public comment items on the agenda. Are there any council members that wish to respond to public comment? Okay, we'll move on to postponed items. There are no postponed items this evening, and that takes us to regular business. The first regular business is the mayoral appointment for the Downtown Development Authority. I will not be taking any action on the DDA appointment tonight, so we will move past that. Brings us to I-2, boards and committees. There are none. I-3, no closed session is requested this evening.
We will.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming.
Mayor, I'm not sure if we'd be doing this at this point or if we should wait till council
I think we should
comments. Does it matter?
I don't think it matters, but it would probably be better if we waited.
Mayor,
City Attorney?
yes, the printed agenda, you should stick to that, and if there is a request for a closed session, that would be appropriately made in the council referral portion of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to consent agenda. Are there any council members that are pulling a consent agenda item? Hearing none, would somebody move the resolution to approve all items on the consent agenda?
I'll move.
Moved by Councilman Campbell, supported by Councilwoman McGinnis, that we approve all items on the consent agenda. Discussion? The vote, Ms. Bittner?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fleming?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McGinnis?
Yes.
Councilmember Teets?
Yes.
Motion passes. Memorandums and future council agenda items, there are none scheduled this evening. That brings us to council comments for items not on the agenda. There's been a request to take a break before the comments, so generally if I have a request, I honor that. So we will be in recess for 5 minutes.
Wait for Dave.
Meeting is back in session. If I said that we were at council comments portion, I meant we were at public comment for items not on the agenda. So when I call your name, I would ask you to come to the microphone. You have 3 minutes. There'll be a yellow light that will come on when there's 1 minute remaining. If you could start to wrap up your comments. And please pay attention to the rules and regulations that are printed in the agenda. The first speaker, I know, Dan Brake. I'm going to pass and come back to Mr. Brake. Resident Alan Walters. Good evening.
Good evening, city employees. This past summer in August, you passed out a 3x5 card to so as the residents on Baker Court, Boyd, Daly, Heartland could have signs put up on Big Beaver and Daly, Rochester Road, and Heartland on the east side for signs for the school traffic from 7 to 9 in the morning to 2 and 4 in the afternoon. So in August, we were sending out cards. We had the whole month of August to get them in. So I started to walk in the streets around the 20th of August to go talk to my neighbors. And I started on my small side of the street and talked to about 4, 5, 6 people, and they all said yes. They're going to vote on it, say yes. And then I worked my way to the east end of Boyd and started there. I only talked to one person that disagreed. He lived just west of, I think, the fire chief next door, a retired gentleman. And as I kept walking down Boyd to the end and continued down Heartland, I came up across about 40, 50 homes, and I got about 15 people that did not receive cards. And I had about a half a dozen that didn't know what they did with them, and they'd like to have it resubmitted to them. So in doing so, I came to see Mr. Bill Hootery, the engineer for traffic, and he was gone on that Friday for city business. And so I was going to leave the paper that I have here with the addresses to be resubmitted to him. And as doing so, I started talking to the lady at the desk, and I asked, one question I asked was, who mailed these out? In a sharp tone, rude voice, she goes, I did. And I'm going, oh God, I mean, and I said, well, these people did not get them, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just coming to drop this paper off. I talked in a decent tone of voice, and she was rude to me. And by the time she was done talking to me, she asked me to leave the city hall. And I said, no, I still got to go see the city manager. I'm not leaving, and blah, blah, blah. I just left her and came upstairs and talked to the manager. After leaving there, I went to the, because she was kind of blaming the Troy post office for the loss of the mail. So I went to the city of Troy's post office to talk to the postmaster or supervisor. And I did talk to a gentleman at the desk, and he said he was an employee there for over 25 years, and he told me, he says, we've been through this before. The city blames them for lost mail. So as I left there, I wasn't satisfied. I did go home, and I called the Troy FBI. I talked to a gentleman there, and he said he couldn't do nothing for me, but he had a phone number for...
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Thank you.
How many minutes was that?
3 minutes.
Where's the 5 minutes?
The rules changed a while ago.
No. I mean...
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Our next resident will be Mr. Dan Brake.
I'm sure I'm not the first politician to be caught with his pants down, but I didn't expect it so early in my career. I was saying, tonight, I want to talk about some facts that we have only recently learned as the result of a FOIA. These are facts that have been kept from you by our city attorney and bear on the Attorney General's lawsuit against our city. The fact is that our city attorney was in discussions with both the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office on how to handle replacing the mayor after the recall, well before the date of Chris Thomas's letter on November 18th. She kept from counsel that the Attorney General and Secretary of State both told her before that letter during the week of November 12th, starting only 1 week after the election itself, that she was wrong in her conclusions and that the election could wait until November 2013. The bombshell letter Thomas sent simply confirmed what they'd already been discussing. She failed to disclose that to counsel and to the public at any meeting following November 16th, including your special meeting just on that subject called on November 21. At last week's council meeting, you deliberated on the decision to appoint the mayor through next November. Council failed again to inform you that she had received 2 communications from the Secretary of State earlier that day directing her to conduct an election in February. It was no longer advisory. It was very clear at that point. It was an order to comply. She continued to maintain her position that the Secretary's instructions were merely advisory while you struggled with your decision and didn't know what the future held. We now know, through this Freedom of Information request, that the city attorney has been withholding information from council that has resulted in a decision to continue to abide by her advice, and the result, the state attorney general is suing our city and probably us taxpayers for noncompliance with state election law. The city attorney and the city clerk also claim to have sought the advice of the Oakland County Elections Office. When questioned this morning, Joe Rozelle, the director of that office, said that he has never had a conversation with our city attorney on the mayoral election date question. I don't ask you to take my word for it. Ask him. What's it going to take for this council to act in the interest of the Troy taxpayers and voters instead of the interest of a small group of people who clearly have a political agenda, a group who will stop at nothing, including breaking the law, to get their way? Please save our city. Do something about it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is resident Irv Woodgrow.
Back again. I came back to talk again tonight because I read Councilman Tietz's interview in the Free Press over the weekend regarding a potential resolution he'll bring tonight regarding resolving the election issue in Troy. So I wanted to weigh in before that discussion occurs. I would not support any resolution that essentially withdraws our case before we hear from the court. Now, I don't care why or how the issue came from the state and they got involved. It's not relevant anymore. Nor do I care when this election occurs. It's not my principal problem. My principal concerns are twofold. One, letting the state being both the judge and jury regarding the interpretation of the law. Secondly, the home rule issue are significant and need the court's help. I know we see a lot of ambiguity between the charter and state law, but I don't think the state, being the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, shares that opinion. It's their way or the highway, essentially. Also, relying on the legislature to resolve this does not help us now if they ever do something. So nothing has really changed in the past few weeks, just a lot of letters between lawyers defending their interpretations. The proper place to resolve these positions is before a neutral third-party arbiter, and that is the court, now scheduled, I believe, for December the 12th. Backing off now against your attorney's advice would do nothing good for the city or any other city that potentially faces this situation. The proper place to resolve this conflict of interpretation remains in the courts, not before this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is resident Andrew Davish.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
My issue is a personal issue that I've given to Aileen Bittner, my application to be mayor, and I continue to get a runaround that they are not taking applications for mayor, they are only taking applications for city council. I've been working with dealing with the state of Michigan for 7 years, so I'm kind of used to getting the runaround from politicians and these kind of people. So I specifically wrote down in my application for committees and council that mayor is my first choice and city council is my second choice. As you may remember, I got an award from Governor Granholm for my service to the community, and my only wish is to serve the community. I have been serving people with disabilities for over 7 years, including my brothers. I have 2 brothers with disabilities. I have finally put them in such a place that they are doing fine, and now I want to serve other people, not just with disabilities, but other people in general. The city of Troy needs a resident like me. Let me give you an example. I went to the Chamber of Commerce for Troy, and I understand that we're not part of the Chamber of Commerce. The city is not part of it, that it is a separate organization. They did not even have this one pamphlet, Today Troy, and I understand that some people do not hand out these pamphlets, that the community group that you have, and it's not the city clerk, but the community liaison does not hand out these pamphlets to the Chamber of Commerce. I asked the Chamber of Commerce, can I have an Oakland County directory, which I already have 15 of, but I wanted to see what they had. She handed me a 2011 directory. This is the Chamber of Commerce of the city of Troy, and they had a 2011. So I immediately went to Oakland County. I picked up an entire case to them, and I dropped it off to them, a 2012 directory, which, by the way, Oakland County was very happy to get rid of because they have 17 cases of them that they don't know what to do with. So that's my story, and I hope you look into the reason why I was given the runaround for putting in an application for mayor, and I don't understand it, and maybe you can comment on it now.
We respond after public comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is resident Barbara Yagley.
Good evening. My comment is on the need for a prompt election for a mayor. I think you're doing a fine job in the month that you've been doing this, Mr. Slater, but you are an appointee to the position, and to have to wait a year is